collecting data. So in a relatively short period of time, although it doesn't seem like that, sea change in terms of data foundations. But if you also take what I think is the other overarching national education trajectory, which is a move toward innovation and a move toward trying to really understand models that work, to the extent we could do a better job of surfacing those cases that do work, and instead of sounding like pointy-headed PhDs who write dissertations, take the substance and write it in a way that has operational clarity in terms of what's working and why in what context. And I think we as educators just do a horrific job at that. To then use that as a tool of leverage to say, because everyone's looking for these answers, the issues of ELLs are no longer sort of in the west-southwest. It's North Carolina with its exploding population. It's everywhere. And so there are lessons to be learned from the history of woe. And new states and new districts are seemingly starting from scratch. And so I think this sort of lessons learned, which everyone talks about forever, but we're not doing a good job because we're not capturing the right elements and details to be able to tell the story in a way that would to tell a district superintendent or a state superintendent of education, here is how this story of success is replicable and adaptable to other situations.
And most states don't have the restrictions that you have in Massachusetts and Arizona. So most states don't have the restrictions because of the law, I guess, in Arizona, and the referendum, or whatever you call it here. Most states have a lot more flexibility than to do those sorts of things. I don't know how. I guess you have to overturn a referendum, you have to do another referendum that people can understand. I don't know. I don't understand people running government like that. You guys in Massachusetts and California boggle my mind. In Maryland, we just make laws. We don't have to do all that stuff. And so,
it was about money, because when Ron Unz came to Massachusetts with the bumper sticker, one nation, one flag, one language, it's hard to say what the bumper sticker would be from our part of it.
No,
and when he spent all this money here, we didn't have money to resist it. In Colorado, at the same time, the same language of the same referendum, there was a wealthy woman who came up with $3 million, and the referendum was defeated in Colorado the same day that it passed here.
Go ahead, Estelle.
I may be revealing my ignorance about the statutory framework that you all are operating under, but something Marie said reminded me of an analogy in the voting rights context, which is it is often hard to find plaintiffs, and sometimes if you find plaintiffs, if you found the plaintiff, they can solve their own problem, and then they have no standing to complain about it. I'm just wondering if there are federal resources in terms of what's in the Department of Education and in the Department of Justice that can essentially run those cases and maybe do some of the laboring or spend some of the money on research and data gathering and maybe get some of this done faster.
Sounds like an art question.
Well, I can start, and I'm going to sound schizophrenic because I actually tried to get this rule changed while I was there and I failed. You don't have to have standing to file an OCR complaint, which I think is actually one of the worst non-rules in existence, but that's yet another conversation. So the bottom line is, if you've got an issue and if you can validly state a claim under any of the statutes that OCR enforces, you've got an investigation. In a related vein, OCR not only has the authority and responsibility actually to investigate every valid complaint that it receives, it also has the authority to be proactive and launch what are known as compliance reviews. It can take smatterings of data or lots of anecdotes or some combination thereof and say, wow, we've got a problem and no one's filing a complaint, we will go launch. And so there are foundations for that happening.
Can you talk a little bit about the referral process between OCR and the Department of Justice?
From my days, actually, the only, I shouldn't say the only, it was rare that a referral would occur in any instance other than OCR having found a violation, and then the question was, what sanction? And just so you are all aware, OCR, by virtue of its statutory authority, can really only do one of two things. If it finds a district or a state or any recipient of federal funds in violation, it can go through an administrative procedure, including sort of an administrative hearing. There's some channels and appeals, but the bottom line is the sanction is withholding federal funds implicated by that violation. And that's not an appealing sanction if you're trying to serve the kids who are at the source of the problem, the notion you're taking away federal funds. It's quite a sort of sword hanging over the head of the district, but it's not a great avenue. The other one is they refer those cases if you are not able to reach a resolution, which OCR is required to attempt to do with the state or district, to refer it to justice, and then justice can choose to initiate litigation.
And justice can do some on its own
Yes.
also, and if you go to their website, they don't post everything, but you'll see that they have posted some cases. This has been an area of some interest to them for the last 3 years in particular. And so you can see that they have done some work there. I don't know how many cases they have that they haven't resolved, but what they've posted are consent decrees where school districts did exactly what most school districts did when OCR comes to your house. You say, how can we resolve this? Because you don't want to get your federal funds cut off. You can see some of those consent decrees there, and they follow all I've analyzed them, and they follow the same lines. You know, have they followed the very things? You have a home language survey, for example, is one thing, and then they just go through the Castaneda piece. Do you have a program that's recognized, that has a recognized theory? Do you have the resources? And is it working? The 3 pieces of Castaneda, and that if you look at the consent decrees, they follow those. They made some variation. There was one, I think there's one out of Massachusetts. There are a couple out of Colorado. There's maybe 5 or 6 are on that website if you're interested in looking at it.
I would just like to add one point to this about the importance of working with parents. I spent all the years I worked on these cases working with parent groups, meeting with them in the evenings, weekends, in their own communities, and trying to develop some kind of a political base among them, to educate them, to have them take the lead. You can, whether you file in court, whether you file with the Office for Civil Rights, I think it's really important to be doing this on behalf of parents. And it can be done, and it has been, and some are more born leaders than others. One parent in Boston was like a general of an army, and she led people in protest in about 8 different languages, protesting to the school committee, to the point that the Boston School Committee, they promised the school committee that if they didn't agree to negotiate with us, that they were going to file a related case to the Boston school desegregation case and have it go before Judge Garrity. It was on that basis that the school committee voted to negotiate with us, and 6 months afterwards we had what we call a voluntary law compliance plan. And just to pick up on what Art said, and you too, Maria, this plan was replete with data collection, disaggregated data collection, broken down by language, by school, by classroom, so you could pinpoint in any classroom who was in the room, who the teachers were, how the kids were doing, and then find out where the problems were. The Boston Public Schools swept that information under the rug. They didn't want to share it, but I knew that they had it, and it can be done.
I would also just say on the data point, I'm going to sound like a sort of one-horse speaker here, but on the data point, there has been such, even since the time of NCLB's passage, such advancement in our capacity on data. We are now no longer looking at how Ms. Jones' 4th grade class last year is doing versus her 4th grade class this year. There's individual ability to track individual student performance and even begin to link it back to some teachers, which is a whole other set of issues. But the point is, we're beginning to develop and implement an infrastructure on data collection that is going to tell not only that snapshot picture, but the rich evolution of what's happening over time in a really much more meaningful way in its powerful context.
Including now they can link the teacher evaluations as part of that. There's 3 companies. One is Performance Matters, which the National School Board Association is now partnering with on their key work of school boards. I don't know if you follow that. A friend of mine and Kevin Kimberly and Joe Villani have written a book on the key work of school districts, which is achievement in analyzing data, and they're now partnering with a company called Performance Matters. It's a very interesting and rich database in terms of what they can do. Pearson has, and I can't remember the name of their product, and there's a third that I can't remember today either, but there are 3 main companies out there that do that school districts are using. My advice to school districts, by the way, is not to build your own, because we will not get them done in our lifetime. So buy one of these off the shelf and modify it. And the companies that I know, at least based on the districts I've worked with, that they're able to modify them away. So there is data out there. And I suppose when you think about you as lawyers, as you live in your school district, that you can be out there working and helping in English language learner programs and finding out what you could do to make the programs better. And then, oh, by the way, you could get some data, right? And help the superintendent do what he or she wants to do.
And oh, by the way, send that to the businesses that are complaining,
Right.
and let them sort of use that as a tool for leverage and argument in public discourse.
I just wanted to follow up on the comment about data. In thinking about parent or community participation in school district governance, it seems as if the Public Records Act is an underutilized lever.
Or overutilized, depending on where.
No, they want to charge you hundreds of dollars to get their data. It's stonewall. It's worse than ever trying to get, if you're a community person or a parent, trying to get data. And now, last week, the Boston School Committee had, their favorites come in, and there's going to be a policy so that researchers and certain people will get data, but people won't get data.
Well, I have a question about that. If they have to report the data already, it's hard for me to understand unless we're talking about a voluminous amount of material, something that can't be put on a flash drive or on a CD.
The trouble is the state collects data, and it's better than it used to be, but it's not nearly the kind of data especially for children of limited English proficiency, the kind of data that parents would want to have.
So you have to go down a level.
Well, and
You have to
you
go to
guys,
the school district.
we have FERPA obligations also, so I just have to speak up for the school districts. We have FERPA obligations, so you're trying to balance, and when parents, so just from the school district perspective, parents do sometimes make requests that the school district doesn't have the manpower, the person power to really produce that information, and it's sometimes it's state law, sometimes it's school district policy that says here's how much you have to pay. It's not so easy, but like in Illinois, they've got an interactive report card, state report card, so you can go on that state website and have some fun. And there's also some, what's that, the one that you can go on and compare comparable schools throughout the country. I forget what that one calls. The second company for the data dashboard is School Matters, I think. I've got that one.
Great schools have some.
Great schools, right. So there is data out there that people can use.
What about the data that the federal government now has made
Oh,
available?
the CRDC data?
Yeah,
It's out there, people are using it.
What is
OCR's using it.
yeah, sure.
What was that?
The, what's it, the
Civil rights
CRDC
act.
Oh, right. That's
data collection, civil rights data collection, I think is what it's called. And if you put it in, so districts are required to provide lots of information, including now, they're including bullying.
right.
So there's going to be some data there, and there have been some interesting stories about, well, so-and-so and so-and-so district didn't report any bullying, so you know there's a problem there, right? You probably got over on that topic, over-reporting, and if it's zero, you know it's not right. So where that goes, but they've got a lot of information there on discipline. If you just put CRDC in and Google, you will find it. And it will take you to this. It's about a year behind, I think, right? And not all the school districts have to do it, it's districts of certain sizes.